My talk title is Living Heaven on Earth. And one of the things that I was thinking about, my process for putting together a talk. So I sit down one day and I write up notes, and I wait till something comes to me for what I want to speak about, and then put all those notes down, go through it, kind of get it organized. And then after that, I go through it a couple times in my head to kind of see what happens, and see what comes up, and I change the notes as I go. And one of the things is that every time I go through the talk, it's different. And then I get up here and I speak to you guys, and it's different again. And there's stuff that comes up that I'm like, where did that come from? And I really do think that, like we said at the beginning, that it's about the energy of the people that are here. And I try to be in flow so that the message that I give you is the message that you guys need to hear and that you guys want to hear, whether you know it or not. So with living heaven on earth, one of the things that I think about is, how would everybody like to live in a world where there was no evil and there was no bad and there was no wrongdoing? Does that sound like heaven on earth for most people? And I tell you, you can live in that world, but you have to be willing to give something up. You have to be willing to give up the idea that something is good or that something is right. Because if you have the idea that something is good, then that means that something else is bad. And if you have the idea of something is right, something else is wrong. So if you want to live in a world without the bad and without the wrong, you have to be willing to give up the right and the good. And the thing about that is that the right and the good and the bad and all that is just a judgment in your head. It's not real. The facts are always neutral. One of my favorite people to quote is William Shakespeare. And he said, "For there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." That was in Hamlet. And if we think about that, so let's say you're in a car accident. Okay, so you think about that and you're like, oh, that's horrible, I was in a car accident. So from your perspective, that's bad. From the guy at the body shop, it's good. Now he's got work. From the guy that you ran into, he's like, yay, I'm going to get a new car. So for him, it's good. And then he sees the check that he's going to get from the insurance company. He goes, I can't get a new car for that. This is horrible. So whether that situation is good or bad all depends on your perspective, on how you think about that situation. And this is all a judgment. And we're very judging creatures. That's what we do. And we're going to talk about how to get around that. Because in Matthew 7:1 says, do not judge so that you may not be judged. When we judge things, that's inviting us to be judged by the same parameters. So I know when we're thinking about a car accident, okay, so maybe you can think about that as, because that's not a huge deal. It's big at the moment, but it goes away. So it's easy to see that maybe, okay, so maybe that wasn't really bad. But there's a lot of other things that happen that we see and that we can experience that seem much worse. There's murders, there's hurts, there's divorces, there's all these kind of things that seem much more cataclysmic, especially if you're living them. So it's hard to say, that isn't good or bad. So to do that, we have to think from a little different point of view. We've talked different times, are you a spirit with a body, or are you a body with a spirit? What is your true self? I think we all can agree that our true selves is not our body. Our body changes. There's millions of cells in your body that die every day. Your body is very different than it was 10 years ago. Your body is very different than it was when you were a kid. But when we think about ourselves, we're still the same person. I still think of myself as the same person that I was when I was a teenager. Lots of times when I think about myself, I still think I am a teenager. So, and so does Donna. But my body has changed. I had more hair then. But my spirit, who I truly am, is the same. So when we can look at things from a spiritual point of view, when we can look at things from us being a spirit, we have a different perspective. If there was a spirit standing here that I was talking to, and I took out a knife and I stabbed it, and then I took out a gun and I shot it, and then I strapped on a flamethrower and I went, is that spirit going to be hurt? No. If I said to that spirit, you're overweight, you're ugly, you dress funny, and I'm going to have an affair with your best friend, is that spirit going to be hurt? No. That spirit is who you truly are. So any hurt that you've ever felt is your body, your mind, your ego identifying with that hurt. You had an expectation, and that expectation wasn't met. And that's where that hurt comes from. You were attached to something, and something happened to that attachment, and that's where you gain that hurt. That's why you think things are right or wrong. The truth of the matter is that we are spirits, and that doesn't hurt us. Many of you are familiar with the Course in Miracles. A Course in Miracles is, this big, thick book. And at the beginning it says that A Course in Miracles can be summed up with this: nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. Your true self, your spirit, cannot be threatened. That's what's real. Anything that can be threatened, your body, your ego, your thoughts about whatever, those can be threatened, those can be changed. That's all just an illusion. Albert Einstein. Reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. Albert Einstein was not known to be, a theologian. He was a scientist. And scientists today are learning more and more that the world around us is an illusion. It's something that we're creating that we can change. So back to this right and wrong. If this is just an illusion, how can it be right or wrong? Deepak Chopra, another one of my favorite authors, said, there is no holy life. There is no war between good and evil. There is no sin and no redemption. None of these things matter to the real you, but they matter hugely to the false you, the one who believes in the separate self. You have tried to take your separate self with all of its loneliness and anxiety and pride to the door of enlightenment, but will never go through because it is a ghost. I know in lots of different religious and spiritual beliefs we talk about sin. And it's not something that comes up here very often, but the idea of sin and being forgiven by God is a myth. It's an illusion. God doesn't have to forgive you for your sins because God never judged you. He never judged anything you did as wrong. He never thought anything you did was a sin. So there's no reason to be forgiven because you were never judged. That's something that was just created by our ego. So as we move through with this, and we have this great idea of enlightenment, or whatever you want to call it, so then the question is, how do you achieve this? And I can promise you that reading spiritual books and doing spiritual practices and all that stuff, it's great. And if it makes you feel better, do it. But there's not a book or a program or anything out there that can get you to enlightenment. The best metaphor that I could come up with this is if you took a baseball and you just covered it with paper and just more and more paper and covered it up. So now it's this big. And then you take another piece of paper that has a picture of a baseball on it and you glue that to the outside. It still doesn't make this big mass that you have a baseball. If you try and throw it across the plate, it's not going to work. That's what a lot of these spiritual practices and a lot of these things do. They're just adding more stuff, and then they go, oh, here's a picture of what you are. We'll just stick that on there too. What we need to do is get rid of all these things. I heard somewhere, knowledge is adding information, wisdom is getting rid of it. So you have to peel away the layers, you have to peel away the excess stuff to get down to who you truly are. Part of the way to do that is to live in the world but not of it. We do live in this world. We do have physical bodies. And this world has rules. If you decided today that you were no longer going to pay attention to stoplights, okay, you're just going to keep driving, you're going to stop whenever you want, God is not going to judge you for that. But there may be a judge that judges you for that. And your life here on earth is going to become significantly more difficult because your car is going to keep running into other people's cars. So, as we live in the world, we have to know that there are things in this world that rules, guidelines, that if you follow them, it's going to make your life here easier. But it's about giving up that attachment. Giving up that attachment to the car. So if your car gets in a wreck, you don't take that personally. It doesn't affect you. Okay, it happened. You accept it. And by accepting those things, and by accepting whatever happened as it's happened, this is just a fact. It's not good, it's not bad, it just happened. Then you can start to live in the world, but not of the world. Anthony DeMello, who's another great author. I have no fear of losing you, for you aren't an object of my property or anyone else's. I love you as you are, without attachment, without fears, without conditions, without egoism, trying not to absorb you. I love you freely because I love your freedom as well as mine. It's easy to say that I'm not attached to this thing, but it's much harder to say that I'm not attached to this person. And we have people in our lives that we love and that we build relationships with. As you have those relationships, yes, it's okay for that relationship to have rules and guidelines. You know, if you're married to someone, that other person probably wants you to come home every night. And if you're not going to come home that night, that should be discussed beforehand. That's a rule of that relationship. But you can love that person with or without that relationship. You know, when you decide that you want to love someone, allow them to have their freedom, so that when you do love each other, you have that choice. You know that both people in this relationship have a freedom to do whatever they want. And with that freedom, instead of being obligated to that person in that relationship, you can choose to stay with that person. And you can choose to do things that that other person is going to appreciate and that that other person is going to like. And you can be that best spouse that you can possibly be, so that tomorrow morning, when you wake up next to that person, they don't say, I have to stay with you. They say, I choose to stay with you. And that can be true of all of your relationships. You know, whether it's people you work with or your kids or your parents, you know. And just because sometimes relationships end, it doesn't mean that you have to stop loving that person. You know, that love and that relationship are not the same thing. Okay, so then so living in the world but not of the world is the first idea. The second one, and this is the one that when I tell you, your ego is going to go, whoa, 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 no, I'm not buying that. Okay? So just be ready. Put that on hold, just try and calm it down. Many times we've heard that as people, that we are one with God. And I'm here to tell you that that is not the truth. You are not one with God. The truth of the matter is that you are God. Each and every one of you. When someone says, I am one with God, there's still separation. Because it's saying, God and me, well, now we're together. But there's still a separation. There's two things coming together to be one. You were never separated. You are God. That is who you are. That is your true nature. Marianne Williamson says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? When actually, who are you not to be? The metaphor that I hear often is that God is the ocean and I am a drop in the ocean. And the problem with that is that we live in a finite world. So the ocean, as vast as it is, if you split it in two, then you would have two pieces that reach half the size of the original. And that's because everything in our world starts and stops. You know, this podium starts here, ends here. Or it starts here and it ends here, depending on which way you want to go. But everything is finite. Everything has an edge. And even when we think about the universe, you know, there's an edge to the universe. Now, what's beyond the edge? I don't know. It's a giant cardboard box. I don't know. What's outside of the box? I don't know. God's not like that. God is infinite. And if you guys remember from middle school math class, if you have infinity and you divide it in half, you get infinity. And if you have infinity and you divide it by all 6 billion people on the planet, you get infinity. So there is no place that God is not. There is nothing that God is not. You can't cut God in half because you don't have an edge to start with. You know, I can cut this in half. We just start here, cut it in half. You can't cut God in half because there's no edge. God doesn't stop. So by saying that we are one with God, or saying that we are just a drop, you know, that's our ego's last-ditch effort to go, okay, so then we're only a little bit separated from God, or we're just a little bit. And that's not the truth. The truth is that each and every one of us are God. And each and every one of us are a part of each other. There is no separation between us. Everything is the same. We are all the same. We are all one. We are all connected. Now, I know it doesn't seem that way. As you're all sitting here in your chairs, there's a separation between you. You know? And if you want to touch the person, you actually have to reach out and touch them. That's this illusion. You know? That's the illusion of this physical realm. So, when I said that you can't be attached to anything, and that if somebody comes and takes your stuff, don't be attached to it. Well, the great thing is that since everything is one and everything is connected, it's still your stuff. It's just over there now. And because you're connected to everything, anything that you want, anything that you desire is yours. It's already you. You just have to make it show up where you want in this consciousness. And remember that you are infinitely powerful. And I think the reason sometimes we believe this is that once you realize that you are infinitely powerful, it's really easy to go, well, if I've been infinitely powerful my entire life, and I'm here, this is all I've done with it up till now? So then our ego jumps back in and says, well, if you were really infinite powerful, you would have done a lot more than this. You'd have did whatever. Don't worry about that. That's another judgment. That's another judgment saying that being in one place is better than being in another place. It's not. It just is. Where we are is perfect. If you would like to change where your physical body is in the next moment, you are infinitely powerful, so you can do that. And they're connected with everything, so you can bring anything you want to you. So don't let that fear get in. So just to recap, to live heaven on earth, give up the idea of right and wrong. Give up the idea of that judgment. You know, Let go of your attachments. Live in the world, but not of the world. Yes, if you follow the rules of this world, it will make your existence easier, and that's okay. But don't be attached to any of that. And then most importantly, eliminate the illusion of separation. When you fully realize that, that's the point of enlightenment. When you fully realize that there is no separation. Doesn't mean that anything's going to change. You're not going to walk around with a glow around your head. Like if you've ever been to some of the churches that have the saints and there's the glow, and we're not going to see that. There's an old Buddhist saying, before enlightenment, I carried water and chopped wood. After enlightenment, I carry water and chop wood. So when you get to that point, what changes is that you're no longer attached to anything. And you see things from a different perspective. So, thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it.